recognizing too here the risks for delaying intervention. We've talked a lot about how we know that feeding eating is a necessary and vital occupation that we all participate in daily. Here are some of the risks for delaying intervention. If you think maybe my kid's a picky eater, they're fine. I was picky when I was growing up, blah, blah, blah. Here are some medical implications to look out for and some things that might happen. A lot of times, as Highland mentioned, more often than not, we get parents just learning that, oh, OT, speech, they work on feeding. Let me go reach out to them. So sometimes in us, getting the proper referrals and meeting with them, we recognize all of these other risk factors that your child may have coming to you. So we might learn that your child is having difficulty gaining weight, or weight loss might be a challenge for them in a consistent fashion. So that's delaying milestones and development. A need for G-tube placement or other kind of alternative not by mouth feeding options for children. For kids that have severely limited oral intake of food, this might be the only option for them, especially if we delay it. So it becomes really important for us to do this as early as possible. Nikki mentioned aspirative pneumonia. If there's some swallowing difficulties, if your child is sick often, has some respiratory issues, asthma, lung issues, whatever you might have as a recurring factor, could be an indication that food is not going where it's supposed to. We have a lot of things that are supposed to go in different places. Your air goes down your trachea into your lungs, and food is supposed to go down to your esophagus, to your stomach. And when those paths cross, it can be truly damaging. We talked a little bit more about that earlier today too. There may be some underlying medical conditions. Shana mentioned earlier that a lot of our kiddos as babies might have GERD, and then they grow out of it. And so we're fine. We don't have GERD anymore because either it's been, we've grown out of it, or we've had some medical intervention and now we're fine. But what happens is that early stages of GERD create these challenges and loopholes in development that maybe your child missed, or perhaps there's still GERD going on, but now it's easier managed. It's not as obvious. Where GERD in babies is likely spitting up and vomiting, GERD in adults is maybe just feeling uncomfortable, or not adults, with children and adults too. Other things like eosinophilic esophagitis is another thing that a lot of times that EOE, it's the hardening of the esophagus that makes truly feeding and eating much more challenging, and a lot of times goes very untreated because they don't know that's what's going on. So your first step could be your therapist, and then we can help support you in recognizing what some of these other risks could be, such as GERD and some of these other things mentioned. We also know social and developmental challenges come from feeding and eating challenges. Obviously, number one is nutrient deficiencies. So if your child is only eating those starchier foods, we're really missing out on a lot of important vitamins and nutrients and things that our bodies need in order for us to do our daily life. We see a lot of kids with sleep disturbances. We see a lot of kids that have a hard time with endurance. This could very well be mostly related to their diet, and oftentimes it is. So we work with you and certainly other professionals like dietitians, nutritionists, GI docs, things like that, to help support you. Where can we find ways to get nutrients when they're not in part of your everyday diet? And it's important to recognize this early on. Food Jags was mentioned earlier too, with regards to I eat the same food all the time, and now I don't eat it at all. These are called food jags, and they can be very dangerous, especially if your child has much fewer foods in their current diet. As you start losing foods, you realize just how challenging this could be. So we want to avoid that as best as possible, and we try and give you tips and tricks and strategies to addressing this. Sometimes early on, we won't mess with any of their current core foods because we're worried that food jags will eliminate food from your child's diet altogether. So a professional working in feeding and eating, like OTs and speech and language pathologists, can really support you in working on how do we bridge the foods that they're eating to other foods without really messing with the foods that they're eating currently so they can keep them. Limited social interactions for your child and family. Right now, we know that there's a lot of limited kind of going out to restaurants and things like that anyway. But a lot of times when we see people, when we're visiting friends or things like that, it's around mealtime. And if mealtime is challenging, I'm not going to seek out those things. So older children who are dealing with this, or older adults who have experienced limited feeding and eating, are certainly recognizing the effects that can have on them. And that's a big impact for the family unit. I can't take Jeremy to the restaurant because he won't eat anything. So we can't go. And that's really isolating and very upsetting. So we want to support you as best we can. We recognize that a lot of these habits are hard to break. And so the more we get ingrained in our habits and everyday experiences, the harder it is for them to be broken. So that's why earlier intervention is the best. If it's not possible, there's still lots and lots of support that can happen, but our progress just takes a little longer. And we know this, and we work with you and your family to kind of mitigating this as best we can, because we recognize changing your everyday routine can be challenging. And so we work with you to address these habits in a much more functional and hopefully successful way.